You ever feel that quiet tension in your body when someone says something that doesn't sit right? That whisper in your gut, that knowing in your chest. It's not just emotion. It's not drama. That's your soul speaking. That's your intuition. And yet so many of us have been trained to override it, to push it down, dismiss it, rationalize it away in favor of being agreeable, being liked, or keeping the peace. But what we don't realize is that every time we silence that inner voice, we chip away at the foundation of who we are. You don't need a flashing sign to know when something isn't right. The body always knows first. It tightens, it pulls back, it resists. But we've learned to betray that resistance, haven't we? We've been told not to be too sensitive, not to overreact, not to trust that inner knowing unless it can be explained. And so we walk into situations our spirit is already rejecting. We stay in conversations that drain us, relationships that confuse us, spaces that deplete us because we've confused endurance with strength. But true strength isn't the ability to stay silent in the face of what hurts. True strength is honoring what your spirit already knows. Let me tell you, intuition doesn't shout. It doesn't always come with proof. It's a soft, steady truth. And the longer you ignore it, the louder your suffering becomes. It starts in the gut, moves.
Every man, at least once in his life, falls to his knees not from love but from the illusion of it. What if I told you that what you thought was her affection was merely a mirror of your own forgotten wounds? Some women do not desire the man before them, they desire the power to conquer his soul, to twist it unknowingly in the theater of the unconscious. And you, unaware of your shadow, will call it fate, when it is in truth a psychological possession. In love, we do not meet the other, we meet our projections. And some projections are not innocent. There are moments in a man's life when he is not loved for his essence, but selected for his utility. It is a silent seduction, an illusion masked in affection. One may believe he is seen, cherished, and understood, but in truth, he has been cast into a role, like an actor on a stage whose lines were written long before he arrived. The danger lies not in the performance itself, but in forgetting that it is a performance. The self, when merged too deeply with the part he is made to play, begins to dissolve. And so the man finds himself trapped not in chains of iron, but in expectations he mistook for love. This is especially true when a woman does not desire the man, but the idea of him a provider, a protector, a symbol. She does not see him but the reflection of her needs. Such affection is not intimacy. It is projection. The ancient Greeks understood this through their myth of Narcissus, whose love was never for Echo, the woman who loved him but for his own image. So too many women love not the man, but what he represents, stability, status, a mask that serves her personal myth. And the moment he ceases to fulfill that function, she may discard him as one might a broken tool. This is not cruelty. It is unconsciousness. I recall a patient, brilliant, ambitious, yet deeply unfulfilled. He had married a woman who praised his success, adored his strength, and clung to his achievements. For years he believed this was love, but when he lost his fortune in a sudden market collapse, the love vanished like mist. What remained was silence. She had never known his soul. She had only known his role. Seneca once wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more who is poor." So it is with love. The man who craves being seen for who he is must first see himself. Only then can he escape the trap of being chosen for what he does rather than who he is. A man must ask, is she loving me or is she loving what I provide? The answer may shake the ground beneath his feet, but it is better to tremble in truth than sleep in illusion. There is a silent force within every woman, an invisible figure formed not from experience, but from collective memory, myth, and unconscious longing. This force is the animus, a masculine image constructed from fragments of father, fantasy, authority, and unresolved desire. But beware, the animus is not a man. It is not love. It is a tyrant cloaked in dreams, whispering to her not of connection but of control. And when a man stands before her, he is not truly seen. He is judged by an inner ideal that no flesh can satisfy. Many men suffer under the weight of this invisible comparison. They are punished not for their faults, but for failing to embody a phantom. The woman believes she seeks intimacy, yet unconsciously, she seeks domination by the voice within that commands. critiques and defines her version of the real man. And should you fail to match its shadow, you will not be corrected, you will be condemned. I once worked with a man who was constantly belittled by his wife, not for his failures but for his humanness. He could not weep without being called weak, nor speak his truth without being mocked. He was not permitted to exist outside her internal mythology. Her animus had decided what a man should be and nothing else would do. Her love was a mirror with conditions, and he was a prisoner of her inherited illusions. Plato, in his Phaedrus, warned of the lover who loves the image of the beloved, rather than the soul itself. This is the animus at work. It desires domination of form, not communion of essence. And the woman who is possessed by it is not loving you. She is attempting to make you serve the idol she worships within. If a man is unaware, he will try endlessly to appease this ghost. But love cannot flourish under tyranny. It demands presence, not performance. A woman must confront her own inner masculine, her inherited judgments, her internalized authorities, before she can truly see a man not as a tool or opponent, but as a soul. To recognize the animus in her gaze is not to flee but to awaken, for only then can love begin. Intimacy, in its truest form, is the meeting of two naked souls, stripped of illusions, free of masks. But what many men call love is merely a shadow, play of their own unconscious longings, cast upon the face of a woman. They do not see her. They see only the parts of themselves they have disowned, the fantasies they have cultivated in secret, and the wounds they have never dared to touch. This is not love. This is projection. And projection is not intimacy. It is possession of the self through the other. A man once came to me, shattered by the collapse of his marriage. He said she changed, but she had not changed. His eyes had finally opened. For years he had worshipped her, not as she was, but as the image he placed upon her. He mistook her silence for depth, her wounds for mystery, her unpredictability for passion. In truth, she was as lost as he was, but he had made her into his goddess. And when she failed to reflect his fantasy, his illusion crumbled, and so did his sense of self. This is the tragedy of unconscious men. They fall in love not with women, but with mirrors. The woman becomes a canvas, and upon her, they paint the mother they longed for, the approval they were denied, the security they never found. But real intimacy demands that we see the other not through the veil of need, but through the clarity of consciousness. And to do this, one must first reclaim the lost pieces of his own soul. Seneca wrote, "He who is the slave of his desires is more of a prisoner than he who wears chains." Projection is desire masquerading as vision. It enslaves the heart and blinds the eye. A man must turn inward, face the archetypes that govern him, and bring them into the light. Only then can he approach a woman not as a savior, not as a fantasy, but as a sovereign being who is no longer needed to complete him. Until a man sees a woman as she is, not as he wishes her to be, he will suffer, and his suffering will be mistaken for love. There is no betrayal more devastating than the one a man inflicts upon himself, not in a moment of weakness, but in a slow, silent surrender to the expectations of others, the illusion of comfort and the fear of his own potential. Most men are not destroyed by their enemies, nor by lovers who deceive them, but by the quiet erosion of their soul each time they say yes when they mean no, each time they mold themselves to be liked, accepted, or desired rather than to be true. This is not humility. This is spiritual suicide. I once knew a man, brilliant and fierce in his youth, who abandoned his path because the woman he loved demanded security over vision. Slowly his fire dimmed. He took a position he despised, wore a smile that wasn't his, and built a life that resembled a prison with polished floors. He justified it as love, as responsibility, but beneath the surface lived a growing resentment, a quiet hatred, not toward her, but toward the part of himself he buried to maintain her affection. This resentment festered not because she asked too much, but because he gave away too much of himself without protest. This, I say, is the darkest seduction, the belief that to be loved, you must first abandon who you are, and what is left when the self is abandoned. An empty husk praised for being agreeable, rewarded for being convenient but dead to his own spirit. Marcus Aurelius said, The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. And when a man thinks only of peace at any price, of pleasing those who do not know his soul, he becomes pale, fragile, and invisible to himself. The world may not call it a betrayal. They may call it maturity, sacrifice, compromise. But a man knows deep within when he has betrayed the call of his own destiny. The truth is this: no woman can truly love a man who does not love the fire in his own belly. And if that fire is extinguished for her sake, she may admire him, but she will never desire him. There's a strange and haunting illusion. Many men fall prey to the belief that a woman's disappointment is a direct judgment of their worth, a personal failure they must urgently resolve. In truth, this illusion is born not of love, but of insecurity, the shadow of the boy within, still longing to appease the mother, still terrified of rejection, still believing that feminine approval is the measure of his manhood. But I say this plainly: a woman's disappointment, more often than not, has nothing to do with you. A woman may carry the echoes of her past, the unspoken wounds of her father's absence, the bitterness of betrayal by men long gone, or the unresolved struggle with her own inner masculine, the animus, when unintegrated, manifest not as clarity but as criticism, perfectionism, and subtle contempt. And if a man stands too near her storm, he will be tempted to absorb it, to personalize what was never his burden to bear. I recall a patient who married a man of quiet dignity, a craftsman who loved her sincerely, yet she grew restless, agitated, dissatisfied. She blamed his silence, his simplicity, his lack of ambition, but in truth she was disappointed not in him, but in herself for giving up her dreams, for never confronting her inner void. He tried to change himself to please her, adapting, performing, but it only deepened her contempt. Why? Because he assumed guilt for a grief that was never his. He betrayed his essence by trying to heal a wound that was not his to touch. Seneca once wrote, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality." So too, many men suffer imaginary crimes against the women they love, convinced they are the cause of her moods, her coldness, her distance. But a man must have the courage to stand firm in himself, to see that her discontent may be the voice of her own soul, not an accusation against his. Only when a man stops reacting to every flicker of her emotion does he become truly desirable, not because he is cold, but because he is rooted. For the woman's storm is hers to navigate, the man's power is to remain unshaken. A grave mistake many men make, particularly those who ache for love, without truly understanding it, is to believe that the feminine is won through endless pleasing, accommodation, and gentle compliance. But what is pleasing if not often a subtle form of manipulation? It is an attempt to gain affection by suppressing one's essence, to seduce through the sacrifice of truth. And the tragedy is this: the more a man tries to please, the more invisible he becomes to the very woman he seeks to captivate. The feminine, in its deepest form, does not long for comfort, it longs for truth. It is not stirred by politeness but by presence, not by compliance but by confrontation with what is real. The man who hides his soul behind agreeable smiles and soft words may win temporary approval, but never true desire. The feminine seeks the abyss, the depth of a man's being, not the safety of his performance. I once counseled a young man who had exhausted himself trying to earn the affection of a woman who kept slipping through his fingers. He cooked her meals, he anticipated her needs. He even silenced his dreams to support hers. Still she grew distant. "I don't know why I'm losing her," he said. And I told him, "You have become so empty in your attempts to win her. She no longer sees a man, only a shadow of one. To please is to betray, not in the obvious ways, but in the quiet self-abandonment that happens when a man trades the depth of his soul for the illusion of harmony. It is not cruelty the feminine respects, but clarity, not dominance, but depth." Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." This is what she truly seeks, not the man who flatters, but the one who lives rooted in his purpose, unmoved by the shifting winds of approval. When a man speaks from the depth of who he is, whether in silence or in speech, he awakens the feminine not as a girl, but as a woman, and only then can the dance between them become sacred. Freedom, for most men, remains an illusion precisely because they are still secretly waiting to be chosen by a woman, by society, by some external force to validate their worth. This longing to be picked is the infantile remnant of the boy, who once waited for his mother's gaze to tell him he was enough. But the man who continues this search in the world of women, careers, or even friendships, becomes a slave to the very thing he believes he desires. So long as you need to be chosen, you are not free, you are obedient. Your actions, though clothed in ambition or kindness, are not your own. They are calculated performances meant to seduce a response. Love, attention, approval. And the moment that response is denied, your inner world crumbles. This is the sign that your center is not within you. It is still lodged in the eyes of another. In my early years, I too was plagued by this compulsion. I recall a time when a woman I admired deeply withdrew her affection. My mind spiraled with self-doubt, as though her rejection had rewritten the totality of my being. But it was in the solitude that followed the cold silence of no longer being wanted that I came face to face with the lie I had lived. I had not loved her. I had needed her to love me, to confirm my value. It was not intimacy I sought, but approval. And there, in that bleak confrontation, I found the first seed of true freedom. Heraclitus once said, "Character is destiny," and a man's true character emerges only when he no longer acts to be chosen, but to embody what is real within him, regardless of who stays or leaves. This detachment is not indifference. It is sovereignty. It is the quiet power of a man who no longer chases mirrors, but becomes the light that reveals his own image. Only when the need to be chosen dies does the soul become whole, and only then can love be given freely, not as a transaction, but as a sacred overflow. It is a bitter truth, and one rarely spoken aloud, that what many call love is but a carefully negotiated contract of mutual denial. Two individuals, both fractured and afraid to face their inner chasms, come together not to awaken each other but to sleep more peacefully beside another dreamer. In this pact they agree silently, "I will not disturb your illusions if you do not disturb mine," and thus, what should be a crucible for transformation becomes a sanctuary of avoidance. They call it romance, but in truth, it is often a truce between two wounded psyches, who are unwilling to confront their own shadows. One offers security, the other validation. One becomes the mirror, the other the mask. It is not union, it is collusion. The anima and animus dance, but they do so blindly, projecting fantasies inherited from the unconscious rather than seeing the soul of the other as it is. And when the veil inevitably tears, when disappointment reveals the truth, they do not say, "I misunderstood myself," but rather, "You have changed." In my encounters with patients, I have observed this countless times. A man falls in love not with a woman, but with the idea of her, her smile, her grace, her attention, all symbols of something lost in himself. He projects his unintegrated feminine onto her, and for a time he feels whole. But when she asserts her true nature, when she refuses to be the container for his fantasy, he feels betrayed, and she too feels suffocated, for she was never seen, only used to mask his inner lack. The philosopher Blaise Pascal wrote, "We run heedlessly into the abyss after putting something in front of us to stop us from seeing it. That something is often love itself. But real love does not blind, it illuminates. It is not comfortable, it is confrontational. It demands the death of illusion and the birth of truth, until love ceases to be a contract and becomes a mirror that does not flatter but reveals. We remain trapped searching for salvation, in the very place where our blindness begins. In the hour of deepest aloneness, a man comes face to face with the one force he has fled his entire life himself. And yet it is here, in this crucible of solitude, that his true power is forged. Not in the applause of the crowd, nor in the longing gaze of a woman, nor in the fleeting thrill of seduction, but in silence, in stillness, where there is no one to perform for, and no illusion left to uphold. It is solitude, not seduction, that returns a man to the seat of his sovereignty. Seduction is subtle tyranny. It flatters the ego while starving the soul. It offers the illusion of conquest, while chaining one to the expectations and projections of others. The man who relies on seduction to feel alive has already surrendered his center. He is no longer the creator of his reality, but a puppet dancing for desire's approval. He becomes the slave of attention, mistaking admiration for love and validation for meaning. I have witnessed it many times. A man devotes his strength, his wealth, even his inner world, to be seen by her eyes, forgetting that if he must be seen to feel real, he was never real to begin with. He confuses his reflection in the feminine gaze for his own identity. This is not love nor power. It is exile. But in solitude, true, noble solitude, the man discovers what cannot be taken from him. He finds the voice within that does not shift with mood or fashion. He uncovers the gold buried beneath the chaos, what the alchemist called the soul Niger, the dark sun within, which burns quietly but eternally. This is not isolation but sacred withdrawal. The gods always demanded the hero leave the village before he could return changed. As Seneca once wrote, "A man is never less alone than when he is alone. For it is only here, when the noise fades and the masks fall, that a man ceases to be a beggar of love and becomes its source. This is where the path begins, not in pursuit but in presence. A man who makes it his mission to save a woman from her own darkness has already abandoned himself. He believes that by rescuing her, by softening her rage or healing her wounds, he will finally become worthy of love. But in this delusion lies the greatest betrayal, not of her but of himself. For when a man seeks salvation through another, he forgets the sacred task of saving his own soul. This compulsion to save is rarely about love. It is often rooted in guilt, in fear, or in the forgotten cries of the wounded inner child, who longed to be seen by the mother. And so unconsciously, he chooses women who mirror the chaos he once tried to soothe. He tells himself he is noble, generous, needed, but behind this mask of heroism lies a truth he dares not confront. He has made her pain his purpose, and in doing so, he has fled his own. There was a man I once knew, stoic, disciplined, brilliant in his work, but who was endlessly drawn to women who were lost in their own storms. Every time she shattered, he would kneel and pick up the pieces, believing that love meant sacrifice, and salvation was proof of strength. But with each rescue, he bled a little more, until one day he no longer recognized himself. He was a hollow shell, filled with resentment, rage, and regret, not because she had failed him, but because he had failed to protect the one person he was truly responsible for, his own soul. You must understand, every woman must confront her own shadow, just as you must face yours. To interfere with her descent is to rob her of the fire that forges her authenticity. You are not her savior, you are not her father, and you are not the balm for her forgotten wounds. As Epictetus said, no man is free who is not master of himself. Until you stop trying to carry her suffering, you will never know your own strength. Withdraw the sword of rescue and turn it inward. Save yourself not from her, but from the lie that love requires your destruction. That is the beginning of liberation. And so I leave you with this. The journey into the feminine is not a path for the weak-hearted. It is filled with illusions, with projections, with echoes of your own unlived life. You will be tempted to chase love, to please, to rescue, to be chosen. But each of these is a mask the ego wears to avoid solitude, truth, and the sacred confrontation with your own soul. The darkness you see in her is often the very shadow you have refused to face within yourself. Let the masks fall. Let the illusions burn. Stand naked before your truth, not as a savior, not as a slave to desire, but as a sovereign being who has turned inward and reclaimed the power that no woman, no praise, no approval can ever give you. Love not with desperation, but with clarity. Relate not to be completed, but to be witnessed in your wholeness. And now I ask you, what illusion will you lay down today? What truth will you finally face? This is your task, your fire, your awakening. Do not delay. Begin now, not tomorrow, not when she changes. Begin with you. Everything else will follow.